Well, folks, it's that time again. Time to look back at the year that was in Vince McMahon's personal sandbox of WWE. Over the years, I've been accused of being somewhat of an apologist for the company, mostly because I don't spend every waking moment screaming about booking or whatever. But this week, I'm taking the gloves off, baby. I'm going full throttle and giving you the top 8 worst things about WWE in 2018. Just real quick, let me send out this tweet to Vince McMahon and Triple H. Hey guys, sorry in advance. Number 8, Braun Strowman's heel turn. Last year, WWE seemed to have a future star in the making in Braun Strowman. Despite being booked as a heel in his feud with Roman Reigns, the fans couldn't stop cheering for the guy. The monster got over because he was everything that Roman Reigns wasn't. He was a badass who beat up everyone, made no excuses, and wowed audiences with his feats of strength no matter how ridiculous they got. Looking at you, grappling hook. Now overall, Braun had a pretty good 2018. He won the Raw Tag titles at WrestleMania with a 10-year-old for a partner, and he won the Greatest Royal Rumble and the Money in the Bank briefcase. But then after SummerSlam, they turned the Meat Castle heel in what was an obscenely transparent attempt to garner cheers for Roman Reigns. It did not work. By doing this, not only did WWE squander Braun's Money in the Bank victory, they also completely stunted his organic progression as one of the company's most cheered stars, turning him into cannon fodder for the Shield. Thankfully, Braun's brush with heeldom seems to have ended for now, but the damage might already have been done. Combine the slowed momentum with an injury that took him off TV for several weeks, and that's not a good look for your possible next big star. Number 7, Rusev Day wasted. Speaking of something getting over that was never meant to, how did they fuck this up? Last year on SmackDown, when Aiden English first sang the praises of Rusev Day, I don't think anyone could have anticipated for it to take off. But as he rolled into 2018, took off it did. Within months, Rusev Day was a talk of the entire fan base of both Raw and SmackDown. It could not be stopped. I can speak from experience going down Bourbon Street WrestleMania weekend. You couldn't go 2 minutes without hearing a big old Rusev Day chant. Rusev Day! Rusev Day! Rusev Day! Rusev Day! Rusev Day! As Shane McMahon famously said on an episode of SmackDown in response to the Mania, duly noted. So how'd the company capitalize on what was arguably the biggest gimmick in the company since the Yes Movement? Well, they did nothing. Absolutely nothing. Well, that's not true. They actually made a Rusev Day calendar where all 365 days were Rusev Day, which was funny, but did it translate into any landmark victories or championship reigns? Well, as Rusev might have said in his old Russian gimmick, niet. For committing the cardinal sin of getting over without company approval, Rusev and Aiden lingered in the mid-card all year, with Rusev finally getting a token championship match against AJ Styles that you probably already forgot about. Then they broke up when Aiden English said he had a sex tape with Lana, and then Rusev got his revenge against Aiden in a 3-minute match on SmackDown, and we've barely heard from either of them since. Simply unbelievable. Oh, and speaking of unbelievable, here's something unbelievably stupid. Number 6, Bobby Lashley's sisters. Last year when Alexa Bliss hosted the infamous Bayley This Is Your Life segment on Raw, many fans said, well, there's no way the company is going to do something worse than that. Then we all had to hold WWE's figurative beer. Bobby Lashley came back to WWE with a lot of fanfare after WrestleMania, and then they did diddly dick with him in the months afterward. He finally got an angle he could sink his teeth into against Sami Zayn. When Lashley said in an interview how much he loved his sisters, Sami responded with a cringeworthy segment that made the old days seem entertaining by comparison. Out came 3 men in drag whose plan was to disparage Lashley and run down his character. It made Sami look dumb, it made Lashley look dumb, and it made all the fans feel dumber for having watched it. I'm feeling dumber for just telling you about it. Somehow, this was not the last time Lashley would come off looking like an idiot in this storyline. Who can forget when Sami challenged Bobby to an obstacle course, which saw our supposed hero blast through it only to get beat up by Sami at the end? Oh, and that came after Sami accused him of stolen valor. This feud could have done okay if they did literally anything else to build toward it. They could have recreated This Is Your Life and it would have gone over more than the 3 men in drag did. But all it did was spin Bobby's wheels for another month and put Sami Zayn on the shelf. Easily one of the worst feuds of the entire year. Number 5, Asuka's fall from grace. Again, I must ask, how do you fuck this up? You don't need me to tell you how big of a deal Asuka was when she made her way to the main roster from NXT in 2017. She had an ungodly unbeaten streak and held the NXT Women's Championship for about a year and a half before getting called up. On Raw, she kept racking up victories until ultimately winning the first Women's Royal Rumble match, putting her on the fast track to WrestleMania. She'd go on to challenge Charlotte for the SmackDown Women's Championship at the show, then she lost clean as a whistle, hugged her opponent, and we were all sad.
I really want to leave right now.
You want to go home? You're already done?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're already done?
But it wasn't like she lost to any random schmuck. She put over Charlotte Flair, who was being built up as a big deal in her own right. If anybody was going to beat Asuka, Charlotte made a lot of sense. But no worries, all you have to do is build her back up with a strong title program, right? Right? Asuka went 0-2 against Carmella for the Women's Championship over the summer, thanks in large part to comedy act and now known creepazoid James Ellsworth. It was booked very similarly to Shinsuke Nakamura's program with Jinder Mahal the previous year, and while Shinsuke's losses were disappointing, Asuka's felt like more of a gut punch considering where she had been before. In the end, all Asuka had was her streak. It was all that her identity had been built around, and when that was gone, she was lost in the shuffle. It's nice they gave her the championship at TLC this week, but it feels too little too late. Imagine how much more impactful it would have been if they struck while the iron was hot. Number 4. Becky Lynch's injury. Boy, Becky Lynch was having a hell of a 2018, wasn't she? After a heel turn at SummerSlam that didn't stick, Lynch became the biggest star in the company with a ton of momentum going into Survivor Series. But it was too good to be true. In the midst of one last physical encounter before the pay-per-view, Becky suffered an injury to her face after a wild punch by Nia Jax, putting her on the shelf and postponing what was becoming a very interesting match against Ronda Rousey. The injury bug couldn't have bit at a worse time. There's a small comfort in knowing that she's still being treated like a big deal and not just being forgotten about while she's injured. As she returns to action, let's hope the company recognizes this rare, golden opportunity that's fallen into their laps and they capitalize on her popularity to create something potentially huge. Number 3. The Brock Lesnar-Roman Reigns Saga. Ever since WrestleMania 31, the narrative had always been that Roman Reigns' coronation as a top star would never be complete until he beat Brock Lesnar for the WWE and then later the Universal Championship. But after this year, I wish they just pulled the trigger on it in Santa Clara and just got it out of their systems. First, there was WrestleMania 34 New Orleans. Surely you'd think after a 3-year span, now would be Roman's time to capitalize. However, the company would troll us when Brock Lesnar retained the championship. Then there was a cage match at the Greatest Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia. The match finish was good in theory, but flawed in execution. When Roman's feet actually hit the floor first, the referee ruled it in favor of Brock. Whether Brock was supposed to retain or not is irrelevant because the whole thing screamed of a botched finish. SummerSlam gave fans the rematch nobody asked for, with Roman finally vanquishing the Beast and getting his moment in the sun. Except for that time he beat Triple H for the belt at WrestleMania in Dallas, but apparently doesn't count. Then came Hell in a Cell and the aforementioned Braun Strowman heel turn. This match didn't even get a proper finish as they both died after a table spot, allowing Brock Lesnar to come in, F5 them both, and referee Mick Foley thrown out the match. That was dumb. Each time Roman and Brock collided this year, the fans did their best to voice their displeasure with what they were seeing, except for the Greatest Royal Rumble because those guys cheered for everything. Whether they were bored with Lesnar's reign or just hated Roman's booking, the fans made it clear they did not want this to happen, yet the company kept giving it to us month after month and finding new creative ways to piss us off. And the real pisser about this whole saga is we never even got a proper conclusion after reality reared its ugly head. But more on that later. Number 2. WWE's relationship with Saudi Arabia. Earlier in the year, WWE announced a working relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, pledging to run several shows over the next decade in that country for a shitload of money. The specific amount has never been made official, but that doesn't matter because all you need to know is it's for a shitload of money. In April, only a few weeks after WrestleMania, fans bore witness to the Greatest Royal Rumble, a show that bastardized the annual classic on name alone. Then came the actual show, and well, this is probably the best metaphor for it.
Dinner with many princes and very important people, and he just... Oh my God, what the heck?
Not only was the show mostly pointless due to the lack of storyline progression or title changes, the company laid on the propaganda thick, broadcasting several video packages that fawned over the host country. It was less of a wrestling event and more of a paid advertisement for a government with a shady history trying to go legit. From the very beginning, many fans felt uncomfortable with WWE doing business with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia due to the country's past. Not only that, many fans cried hypocrisy at a company who spent an awful lot of time talking about how progressive they were in hyping up this women's evolution, only for the ladies to stay home this time around. Yet that inaugural event mostly went off without a hitch. For a brief moment, some, yours truly included, were convinced by WWE's Purple Pros that we were seeing the beginning of a kinder, gentler Saudi Arabia. Until Soon came stories of the nation's sports authority freaking out after the Backlash promo aired with the women in their wrestling gear. Then came the story of a Saudi man who was arrested after criticizing pro wrestling. And then came the reports that Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi-born journalist who was a permanent resident of the United States, was kidnapped and brutally murdered in Turkey, an act that many intelligence agencies allege was done at the order of Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Not a good look. As the news of Khashoggi's murder dominated the headlines, WWE took a lot of flack for their relationship with Saudi Arabia and their upcoming show Crown Jewel. John Cena and Daniel Bryan, two of the company's biggest stars, pulled out of the event at a protest. So how'd the company respond to this? Well, except for no longer advertising where the show was actually taking place, nothing. Then came the show itself, and by all accounts, it was a train wreck. They brought back racist hot dog Hulk Hogan to show up in exactly one segment that they've never mentioned since then. They had Shane McMahon win a World Cup tournament that featured no international talent and that he wasn't even in to begin with. Brock Lesnar won back the Universal Championship right after losing it, making the top babyface look weak as a result. And they wasted Shawn Michaels' return to the ring in a match that many say did not live up to the hype, and oh yeah, also hasn't been mentioned since. It was the most passive-aggressive response to the controversy WWE could have possibly come up with. Oh, you don't like us running this show, do you? Well, we're gonna run a show that's so bad no one's gonna want to see it. On the one hand, I totally understand WWE's perspective on this. From a business standpoint, it would have been foolish to walk away from all that money and possibly walk into a lawsuit had they backed out. But in a relationship that was already controversial from the beginning, Khashoggi's murder gave the company all the justification in the world to back out of the agreement, and I don't think anyone would have blamed them for doing so. But in typical WWE style, they plugged their collective ears, lowered their heads, and went right on through with Crown Jewel, and it was what it was. And with another 9 years left in this deal, we could be in store for a lot more headache. Before I present the worst of the list, it's time for a non-WWE honorable mention, and let me tell you, there was a lot to choose from. There was Takahashi's neck injury, James Ellsworth caught sexting a minor, Enzo being Enzo, Austin Aries main eventing Bound for Glory, but this year's pick was a much deserving late entry. Ain't that a brick to the head? I'm aware of the irony in pointing out something being too violent in a death match, but this particular stunt in Mexico went beyond the pale. Last month, a wrestler by the name of Angel El Demonio crossed the line when he threw a solid concrete block at the head of his opponent, Cuervo de Puerto Rico. Cuervo never saw it coming as it came from above and behind him. The impact caused a fractured skull and a blood clot which required life-saving surgery. It was a sickening and despicable stunt that could have ended up killing the guy. Now, thankfully, Cuervo seems to be making a full recovery, but that does not dismiss the actions of Demonio. Even in a death match, there are limits, and this stunt crossed that limit in every sense of the word. Could this have been a byproduct of the industry constantly raising the bar, upping the ante in order to try and get a reaction out of fans? I certainly hope not, and I also hope this near universally negative response to this stunt serves as a cautionary tale to any other wrestlers who might even think about doing something nearly as extreme as this, that sometimes it's not worth the risk. And the number one worst thing to happen in WWE in 2018 was Roman Reigns' leukemia returns. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the most frustrating things about this seemingly endless rivalry between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar was, once Roman finally won the damn championship, we never got to see what he could do with it. But unlike most other booking decisions, you can't blame this one on creative. In late September, Reigns opened an episode of Monday Night Raw with the announcement that the leukemia he had battled more than a decade earlier had come back. He was forced to relinquish the big red belt and has since undergone treatment to fight the disease once again. The news left many fans and wrestlers shell-shocked. Say what you will about his booking for the last 4 years, but Roman has objectively been one of the hardest working individuals in the company, doing everything the company has asked of him, even at the risk of alienating other parts of the fan base. Unlike other former main eventers and locker room leaders, you're hard-pressed to find anyone saying a bad word about the guy. If anything, the news forced a lot of fans to step back and take a look at the big picture. Yes, Roman's booking was not perfect, but moments like this make you realize that at the end of the day, these men and women are human with real-life problems like the rest of us. It doesn't matter if Roman Reigns was the top guy in the company or the lowliest jobber. To have anyone be forced to walk away from wrestling due to this horrific disease is simply tragic. And though this story is the worst of WWE in 2018, here's hoping that a triumph over the illness and a return to the ring can top a best-of list in the near future. Let me know what other infamous moments from the year you think belong on this list, and come back next week when I reveal the top 8 best things about WWE in the year 2018. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.